Look at the palaces, the private jets, the yachts, the weddings that cost more than most people will earn in a lifetime. Royal families and money have always gone together. But here's the thing, not all of them made it the same way. Some sat on land passed down for hundreds of years. Some literally struck oil. And one man, back in the 14th century, was so obscenely rich that when he passed through a foreign country handing out gold, he tanked the price of gold there for over a decade. So where does all this money actually come from? And who's sitting at the very top? That's what we're getting into today. The ones who started it all. Let's go back to the beginning, and when it comes to royal wealth in history, one name always comes up first. Mansa Musa, 14th century, Mali Empire. Most people who study wealth consider him the richest person to ever live, full stop. His wealth is so large that historians genuinely cannot put a number on it. He didn't own the goldfields directly. What he did was tax the gold miners and control the trade routes that moved gold and salt across the Saharan region. When your whole empire sits on top of the world's most valuable trade corridors, that's enough. But here's what really puts it into perspective. In 1324, he made a pilgrimage to Mecca. On the way, he passed through Egypt and gave away so much gold that the price of gold there collapsed and took roughly 12 years to come back up. That's a different level. Then there's Augustus Caesar, the man who built the Roman Empire after years of civil war. At the top of his power, his personal wealth was about 1/5 of everything the Roman Empire had. He inherited a huge chunk through Julius Caesar and kept growing it through taxes and trade. And you can't go through this without mentioning King Solomon of ancient Israel, somewhere in the 10th century BC. The accounts all point to international trade and gold mines as where his money came from. Nobody can put a real number on it. Historians still argue about it. But his name has been passed down for 3,000 years as the go-to example of a rich king. That kind of reputation doesn't happen for nothing. And by the way, if any of this is already surprising you, just wait. It gets a lot harder to believe from here. Subscribe so you can catch the next one. The Empire Runners. A few centuries later, two men stand out not just for being rich, but for running economies so large that their personal money and their country's money were basically the same thing. Akbar the Great, Mughal Empire. He ruled from 1556 to 1605. Adjust his wealth for inflation, and historians put it around $21 trillion. The Mughal Empire at its peak was pulling in roughly 25% of the entire world's GDP. His money came from taxing farmland, running the Silk Road trade, and building an administration that actually worked across a massive, complicated empire. He also spent a lot of it. Fatehpur Sikri, the arts, huge cultural projects that are still standing today. Then there's Emperor Shenzong of China's Song dynasty, who ruled from 1067 to 1085. His inflation-adjusted wealth lands around $32 trillion. Under his rule, China standardized its currency, pushed farming reforms, and opened up market trade in a way that made the Song dynasty one of the most economically advanced places on earth at that time. Both of these men weren't just wealthy individuals, they were essentially the state. Their personal fortune and their country's fortune were one and the same. which is why the numbers are almost impossible to calculate today. The European royals. European royals worked differently. Less empire conquest, more land, inheritance, and keeping a tight grip on taxation. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, ruled from 1643 to 1715. He didn't build his wealth through trade or gold mines, taxes, state monopolies and land. That was his model, and he spent an enormous amount of it building Versailles, which remains one of the most expensive construction projects in European history. Before modern countries took over, historians generally point to his reign as the high point of European royal wealth. Now the British royal family is a different story, and it's more complicated than it looks. Queen Elizabeth II had a personal net worth of around $600 million. King Charles III is currently around $800 million, a lot of that coming from estates like the Duchy of Cornwall. But here's the part people get wrong. The big stuff. The Crown Estate, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, the Tower of London. None of that is their personal money. It's worth billions, but it doesn't belong to them as individuals. It belongs to the Crown as an institution. And the reason that happened goes back to the 18th century. George I, the second and the third were all notoriously bad with money and kept running up a debt with the government. So in 1760, George III made a deal. He gave up the Crown lands in exchange for a fixed annual payment from the government. That payment still exists today. It's called the Sovereign Grant. Between 2018 and 2019, it came to about £80 million, and it's meant specifically for official duties, staff, and keeping up the royal residences, not personal income. So the British royals look a lot richer than they actually are. The image is bigger than the bank account. The Gulf, where the real money is. This is where the numbers get hard to process. The House of Saud, Saudi Arabia, estimated worth $1.4 trillion. That is not a typo. The family has around 15,000 members, and the money is built almost entirely on oil, specifically through Saudi Aramco, which is one of the most valuable companies that has ever existed. On top of that, they have moved into global investments, real estate, technology, and sports. To put 1.4 trillion in context, the British royal family as a whole institution comes in at around $88 billion. The Al Thani family in Qatar sit at around $335 billion. Both of those combined still don't touch what the Saudis have. Qatar is worth talking about separately though. The Al Thani family controls the world's third largest natural gas reserves and runs their wealth through the Qatar Investment Authority. And the way they've spread that money around is something else. They own Harrods, they have a stake in the Shard, they own Paris Saint-Germain. The Sultan of Brunei, Hassan al-Bolkiah, has assets around $30 billion. All of it built on oil and gas. He's probably most famous for owning over 7,000 cars and living in one of the largest palaces in the world. Kuwait's House of Sabah sits at around $360 billion, mostly through the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation and the Kuwait Investment Authority, one of the oldest sovereign wealth funds in the world. The pattern is obvious. The richest royal families today are almost all in the Gulf, and almost all of them got there because of what was sitting underground. Small country, real money. Not everyone needed an oil field. The House of Liechtenstein, a country most people would struggle to find on a map, has somewhere between $7 and $9 billion. And unlike almost every other royal family on this list, they barely use public funding at all. Their money runs through the LGT Group, a private banking business alongside real estate, wine estates, and a serious art collection. For a country that small, that's a proper financial operation. Prince Albert II of Monaco sits at around $1 billion, built through Monaco's real estate, the Monte Carlo casino, and the hospitality side of things. Monaco's tax setup and the steady stream of wealthy visitors keep the money moving. These two show that you don't need oil or a conquered empire. Build the right businesses and the money sticks around. So what does all of this actually come down to? Royal wealth has never really been about the crowns or the castles or the jewels. It's always been about having control over something other people need. In the 14th century, that were gold trade routes. In the 16th, it was the Silk Road. On the 20th, it was oil. The families that moved with the times and turned their resources into real businesses. Those are the ones still sitting on serious money. The ones that didn't, like the Romanovs of Russia, whose entire fortune disappeared with the 1917 revolution, became history lessons instead. At the end of the day, royal wealth is part inheritance, part smart decisions, and a lot of being born in the right country at the right time. If you watched all the way here, thank you, seriously. Smash that like button, it helps this video reach more people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got more coming. See you in the next one.